Hello, and welcome to Radio Juxtapoz, produced by the Unibrow. In today's episode, we host Montreal-born, Los Angeles-based artist David Altmejd. Host Evan Preco spoke with David at his LA studio on the occasion of his solo show, The Serpent, at White Cube Gallery in New York. This episode of Radio Juxtapoz is brought to you by the generous support of the Artemisia Foundation, a world-class museum of contemporary graffiti and street art in Bisbee, Arizona. The Artemisia Foundation features over 1,000 works of art by 125 artists from 50 countries around the globe. You can explore their programming and collection over at artemisia.com. So please subscribe to and share this podcast. We hope you enjoy this conversation on Radio Juxtapoz, and thank you for listening.
Hi.
Hey.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Happy Monday.
Thank you.
What a good time to talk about the restructuring of hierarchies in the world.
On Monday, because the week is starting?
No, it's because talking to you and your new show and everything.
Yeah, totally.
Can you introduce yourself?
So my name is David Altmejd. I'm a sculptor based in LA. I'm originally from Canada, and I moved to the States like about 25 years ago actually. Been in LA for 5 years. Loving it here. The weather, my backyard.
Yeah, I always find it interesting. It took me a minute to say I was from Los Angeles or I live in Los Angeles. Did it take you a second especially when you're living in New York for so long, to all of a sudden say, "Hey, I'm now making and creating in Los Angeles"? And what was the kind of reason for the move?
Oh, the reason for the move, I think that I just wanted to make a change in my life. You know, I was actually in a relationship with someone that also wanted to make a move, and we were both at the same time, you know, I think we had reached a point where we just felt like we had done everything we could. There was nothing new that was like coming out of our practices. So that actually changing context, changing scenery, changing chapter would be a kind of healthy thing to do.
Did it also feel like, it feels like when you move to Los Angeles from a place like New York, or even from Canada in general, it feels there's almost like you're restarting, even though you have a already established career. It's like you're kind of refreshing what it is that you do. Yeah,
I mean, like when I moved to Los Angeles, unlike you, it didn't take me a long time to identify to my new city.
Okay.
Because I feel like it's such a loaded city. I
mean,
Los Angeles is sort of, Hollywood is there, the palm trees are here. It's very specific, you know, as opposed to New York, that I never really found specific in a certain way. It didn't actually influence my identity.
Yeah,
it wasn't part of my identity.
Yeah,
just like being from Montreal wasn't really part of my identity. Even though I love these cities, they weren't defining me. But to say that, you know, I'm from Los Angeles actually gives a lot of information.
I find that so fascinating, because I was thinking, and we're going right into this, I was thinking about this idea that what you do, the physicality of the work, the fact that it takes up space in your life, unlike a painting, and paintings do take up some space, but the fact that a sculpture you can walk around, move around, feels more New York to me than Los Angeles, where it's a place of dreams, where you sort of, things are on a film, and or the history of its film. And it feels like such an interesting juxtaposition, and maybe the way the city is moving in general, this new kind of physicality.
That's really interesting. I can totally imagine how that in this way the city would influence the work.
Yeah.
It like, you know, Los Angeles, you know, encouraging things to be more expansive, and New York kind of more contained or restrained. But for me, it was always the other way. I mean, like New York, I think it's because maybe it's my personality of always trying to sort of like do what's not expected or something, you know? So being in New York and being sort of like restrained by the structure, the space, the amount of people, and forcing myself to be contained in my own bubble, I sort of always tended to want to expand, you know? And now that I'm in Los Angeles, where everything is just wide open, there seems to be less boundaries. It's kind of like the doors are always open. My studio doors are always open, even in even in the winter.
Literally, they are open right now. It's amazing.
Literally,
Yeah.
and sometimes I can even like go out and work outside, like whenever if I'm working on something that's a little bit, that makes more dust or whatever, or resin that's more toxic or whatever, I just step outside any time of the year, just work outside. So it seems to be there's less boundaries and there's a call to sort of expand. But for me, no, it just makes me want to do more work that's more restrained.
The new show is called The Serpent.
Yeah.
And it's at White Cube in New York. And I was saying before we got on here that I had gone to see this exhibition of the letters of Franz Kafka at the Morgan Library in New York, and immediately like had this thought of your work looking at his letters about the metamorphosis. And of course, like you had the show that had just opened in New York. It was great timing, all that kind of stuff. And I was thinking about how you are playing with, as I was saying earlier, about the readjusting of hierarchies of humans, of animals, of the natural world versus the synthetic world, this kind of psychological battle within ourselves, also just the way the natural world is having a psychological battle with us. And so Kafka made sense to me. I just thought of you immediately. I maybe talk a little bit about what the Serpent's about and kind of where your head is at this kind of stage of your career, which is a long-standing career.
Yeah, I mean, the Serpent, it's definitely the serpent as a subject matter or as a symbol or something is definitely something that had been kind of trying to manifest through my work for a while. Maybe if I had noticed it in my work, sort of like peeking out of holes and stuff, but in a very shy way. Mm-hmm. It wasn't really like emerging like in its full force. But so I think it's because I wasn't ready. Maybe it's because I felt like it was like too huge of a symbol to tackle right away, and I wasn't ready. But I think that maybe because I'm in LA now, or because of the details of my life and whatever, or how I am, sort of, the mood I'm in, whatever, that I felt like I was okay with tackling something really big that would probably come with a lot of chaos, and that I had no idea where it was going to go, the shape it was going to have, or whatever. So that was the perfect moment for me to sort of tackle something unpredictable like that. And so I did it. I made it, the serpent itself it's made of a series of heads that are, placed one after the other. Most of them are sort of merging into the other. So it's not like as if each head was sort of like really, it's not as if each head was completely visible, right. They're kind of like each head is entering the other one in a certain way, and they're all transforming, and they're all becoming, each of the head that defines the body of the serpent is slightly different from the previous one.
This is good because it feels like my metamorphosis thought of you is working out here quite well.
I mean, like when I became, that wasn't my intention. I really, like when I began working on the serpent, I thought that all the heads would be identical,
And why did you think that, by the way? What was the, and how did that change? How did all of a sudden, did you start getting new ideas as it was happening? Because I like the fact that you're almost drawing as sculpture. You let the sculpture happen almost as a drawing. It's very fascinating, your process. And so I'm wondering if something changed in the middle of making this thing, that the heads started becoming more, I don't want to say blurred or eating each other, but like that kind of almost like movement that is static.
Yeah, I mean, so as I began, yes, I wanted all the heads to be identical. And the reason was because it was a sort of like clear concept. So it was a clear concept. I will make a snake made of identical heads. It was like I could imagine the process of making it. It gave me enough confidence. I'm like, oh, I can do this technically,
right.
So I started working on it. But of course, as I start working on it, I mean, there's mistakes. If the serpent is changing direction, I have to cut the slices of the head in a different angles, and then I have technical problems to solve. So at the end, it's like, I couldn't make it all, the heads couldn't all be identical. So So I just decided to actually follow that. I mean, I kind of interpret it as if it's the serpent that wants to go that way.
Right. Yeah.
Who wants to transform constantly. So all the heads are different, slightly different, and and I just thought that actually that's more interesting because as the heads started transforming, I started being able to read the different narratives, connected to transformation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And stuff like that. So, which made it really interesting. So so at the end, the snake itself is sort of like the story of a life. You can see it as, with a beginning and end. There's a rise, there's a fall, there's a death, going through a hole underground, then coming out. There's decay. There's the connection with the opposite.
I was thinking about this, is that I don't really know how I interpret what a serpent is just as the word. When I think of snakes, do they scare me? Yes, they kind of do. Am I fascinated by them? Yes, I am. And historically, I think of, they're used in biblical, there's so many uses of the snake. And so what was your intention of the serpent just as a word? What was the power of that word for you?
Well, I'm really interested in mythology. I'm really interested in stories, in archetypes, and the serpent itself was like, I had never been aware of it throughout my life as something that I connected to. Yeah, and then all of a sudden I started dreaming about it. It appeared in my consciousness at one point. I didn't know why. Always very mysterious in my dreams. And then I started seeing it everywhere in culture, and I realized, well, it seemed, and also when I explored myths and stuff like that, it seems like as I zoom in on symbols, it seems to be one of the most fundamental things. It's like the first thing that appears out of nowhere, almost. So it's always been really loaded with that kind of mystery. I think it's probably, when I think of symbols, I think it's probably the one that's the most mysterious for me. Yeah. And that seems to be coming from the most profound, dark space. So I'm excited about that. And I feel like actually I started feeling like, oh yeah, there was something to discover. I wanted to dig inside that symbol a little bit more. So that's why I made that piece. And, since then, I'm looking at it. I'm looking at the piece that I made. I'm trying to take distance and sort of interpret it. And I don't know. Is it a feminine symbol? Is it a masculine symbol? I don't know.
Yeah, this is kind of like what I would get. It's like I was really trying to think about what my relationship to that word and to that shape and to that history and to that myth and all those kind of things, and what my relationship to is. And I can't quite pinpoint like where that comes from, but I think it's fascinating that you are starting to see it as like in your dreams and as a symbol, and all of a sudden it starts becoming, oh, maybe I need to tackle this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's what I did.
Is that how you normally work?
No, not really. I mean, usually it's, I don't know where I'm going to go at all, and I start working on the most basic type of pieces, which is like a human-like bust. Yeah, I would make the bust of a man, for example. Yeah. And as I start working on it, then there's unpredictable mistakes that happen, and that I see whenever I make a mistake, whenever I'm surprised by something that I did not that I did not intend to do, I start seeing it as a thought or a voice that's not coming from my intellect, but rather coming from the other side. Right. Yeah. Yeah. As if, and it's like, it's really, I mean, I think I'm very pro mistake. And I think that mistakes, glitches guide me in a way, because if I make a mistake, I actually pay attention to it, because a mistake is by definition something that was not intentional. Right. Yeah. Right. It's like, I feel I'm always afraid that my mind is determining so much what's going to happen. And whenever I have the feeling like there's something else that's trying to voice its desire, then I really pay attention to it, because I know that it's not coming from my mind.
Right.
It's coming from something else, another dimension or something. So then I start listening to it, and it's sort of like tells me things.
Yeah.
It tells me where it wants to go. And so I realize that the matter itself, there's something in matter that has its own desire, that wants to kind of like be embodied in a specific way. And it's,
it's funny because I was thinking about how your work has this, obviously this very raw quality to it. And there's a combination of materials, and there's like this idea of encapsulating movement, but also encapsulating subconscious thought. And there's all these like different parts. And I always feel like when I see your work, like whatever you're calling a mistake, I always wonder if I like to see like I try to find like through lines, like where you started something and where it starts going, because it's so fascinating to see when you start adding all these different materials together and how you let yourself kind of be guided through a sculpture, as opposed to having this. I assume you don't always have this incredible master plan with each work. I don't want people to think like you're very unintentional. Like, no, you're intentional, but like you don't.
No, but that's what my intention is to actually let something else take control.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I mean, there's a part of me that's like I consider myself being pretty clever, and being able to sort of like, master material, and I have specific ideas that I want to illustrate through my work or whatever. But there's another part of me that just likes to get away from that.
Yeah.
So
right.
like so as I work, I sort of like there's this conscious part of myself that sort of like is very excited about giving a direction to the piece. But the second I feel like, no, the piece wants to jump somewhere else, I'm really happy about letting it sabotage what I wanted to do and become its own self. It's a little bit like, okay.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say it's a little bit like we were talking about my cat.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's a cat is like came in my life a few years ago, and came right at the moment where I became aware of the fact that I didn't want to control everything. I didn't want to everything to revolve around me. That I was able to actually appreciate the fact that my cat, for example, decides when it wants affection from me.
Yes,
it's the one that defines it. So I kind of like there's a sort of feline energy of being like seductive, but also sort of like aloof and kind of wants to do its own thing, that I started really appreciating in my cat and in my work as well. That sort of energy that comes from the work, and I'm like, that's like, no, I'm not going to do, I don't want to be what you want me to be. I want to be what I want to be.
We were, to the listeners, when I walked into David's home, I saw his cat, and I was thinking to myself, because we're talking about these restructuring of hierarchies, I'm going to keep going with that because I do really feel like that is so much of the work. You were a dog person and you had a cat, and a cat really, for anybody who has a cat, you really restructure your thought process of having a pet when you have a cat, because cats are so much different than dogs. Their needs, their wants, their attitudes, their perception of the world is so much different than dogs. And you really do, like, you learn to live in a different way when you have a cat. It's just a different experience. And I was, curious how it influenced your work, and you just kind of eloquently said that, a cat plays a role.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's actually the cat that influenced my work, or if it's something deeper that was like, I would argue deeper in my life where I was ready to sort of explore that change,
right.
as like my my ego being the center of everything,
Right.
you know? And, you know, like my cat is just a sort of something that happened because I was ready
Yeah.
to welcome it and to appreciate it. Same way that, same thing that happened in my work also.
Yeah.
Although it's fun, it's interesting because I think that it's always been there in my work. So the cat has always been in my work, that feline energy, but I just wasn't aware of it. You
Right.
know?
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's a grotesque nature to your work. I mean, there's some grotesqueness. Like it's just like you make us really think about the human condition, but also, you know, our internal monologues, our internal views of ourselves and of others. We're in a really interesting time in history where we're getting so many competing different versions of conflict. For a long time, it was like, you know, what are we going to do about the environment? And then it was about what are we going to do? How are we going to socially interact with each other in a more progressive, inclusive way? And now we're kind of dealing with this whole other version of conflict, which is coming from a, you know, destruction of social order in some ways. And your work kind of speaks to all these different things, but you've gone through these different stages of like what the work could mean to other people. Like, where do you feel you are right now with your relationship to the viewer in terms of showing people what is actually happening within yourself and within the world?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm not really good at showing. I don't think that I would be really good at showing people what's happening in the world. I think
you do in a way that's not conscious, but yes, yeah.
Unconsciously. I think that I'm really focused on my inner world.
Yeah.
I think that when you were talking about restructuring of hierarchies, I think that like I'm becoming aware of like that there's so much conflict within myself, sort of like that there's many entities, energies, whatever, archetypes, whatever inside myself and I'm becoming aware of them, and I'm sort of kind of I feel like hierarchy is something that's going to be restructured organically, but I don't really have to actually be active in a certain way. It's
because we just do it anyway, because it just happens naturally no matter what.
I think it happens. I think I think that it will happen. I think that, I mean, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I mean, the feeling I have is that a lot, like when I look at the world and when I look at what's happening in the world, I sort of see it as maybe a projection of what's happening inside of me. So if I see conflict in the world, it means that, you know, there's something that's kind of conflicting inside of me.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to maybe sort of like act as a kind of observer of it. Maybe sort of like things need to sort of restructure themselves. Power needs to restructure itself within myself, and then maybe it'll happen outside of me. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's all very mysterious for me. Let's
go back to like growing up in Canada. You grew up in Montreal. Great city, great art city, great cultural city. What was kind of the early stages of you becoming an artist, and also what are the kind of the early stages of maybe you making sculpture? Because making sculpture is a unique process unto itself.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been drawing. I was one of those kids that draws all the time. Yeah. So I've been drawing all my life, even like through high school, and you know, my notebooks were filled with little drawings, and they were passed around in class, you know, and people appreciated what I was doing and stuff. So I built this sort of like this excitement about just drawing.
What kind of drawings? What were you drawing? Do you remember? Like,
caricatures of features. Okay. And, you know, like, and then it became, you know, when I was a teenager, it became a little bit more sort of surreal and weird. And, you know, I realized also how the weirder it was, the more excited it made people, you know? So like that weirdness has a kind of power. And I became confident about that. But I always wanted to be a biologist. So, so I started university in biology. And very quickly after one semester, I realized that I couldn't go through the education system, the science, the academic science kind of thing, I wasn't going to be able. I mean, I think that I love science. I think there's something really creative.
Yeah, and like no shit, like obviously biology plays a part in what you're doing. So it's like
Absolutely.
it's not like you didn't take it with you in some ways.
No, it's true. I mean, I love it. It's creative. It's about life. It's like it's mysterious. It's fascinating. Whatever. But I just wasn't going to be able to go through the studies.
Yeah.
Of it. So I just decided to switch to art school. And I went to art school.
Which seems like I actually find that to be a natural change, biology to art. I don't know why. I find that to be a natural thing. Was there any sort of competing voices from other people around you who were like, what are you doing? Or did it feel natural for lots of people that you were going to make that?
It didn't feel natural for a lot of people. I mean, like people that knew me a lot knew that I had a lot of, I was excited about always making drawings and showing them, you know? So it was a sort of, it felt like a natural thing. I don't know if they thought, oh, biology to art school, yeah, totally makes sense, But they understood that for me as a person, it's something that I was excited about. Of course, it's
building blocks of life, building blocks of creation. It all seems to make sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a deep connection between, the fascination with living things that mutate, that are so colorful, that vibrate, and then the fascination for art. It's kind of there's a mystery in both of them that's kind of really, really seductive and attractive. But just to come back to then when I entered art school as a drawer, painter, and that's what I started doing. But of course, like in art school, there was a mandatory class that was called Introduction to Sculpture. And so I had to take that class. And that's where I made my first sculpture, the first object ever. And it was like right away, I knew that that's what I was meant to
cool.
do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And what did it look? It wasn't like, I don't want to say like, did you create like a Rodin type sculpture? Or was it kind of in the vein of like what it was that you would become?
Yeah, it was very much in the vein.
Okay.
It was a bust of a Napoleon type figure, but made in colorful silicone.
Oh, nice.
And I presented it by just throwing it on the floor. So it was like just as a sort of like silicone flat, like object, portrait of, Napoleon or something that was like lying on the floor. It's very similar to what I'm doing now, but yeah.
I don't know why I'm laughing at the scene of like a Napoleon thing, but it's quite political, even for like there's a symbol there. I mean, like
yeah, there is a symbol. There's a type of in Napoleon. There's a sort of like symbolic of a masculine order. And then I guess presented in a sort of silicone where it just becomes a blob.
Yeah, right.
This blob that like ends up being like all this, weird on the floor. Yeah, I guess there was that sort of contrast. Yeah, maybe like, yeah, that's interesting. I never thought of that, but yeah, totally.
And then so you take this sculpture 101 class, let's call it, and you found something. Yeah. So then how does this germinate? Like, how does this become, like, where do you go from there? Like, you're like, I'm in, I found it. I found my voice.
Yeah. I mean, and the reason I found it is because I very, very quickly realized that the status of the sculptural object in space, as something that can be experienced, functioned completely differently than painting and drawing, which in my mind, painting and drawing exist in a sort of space of representation. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I had an object right in front of me that was breathing the same air that I was breathing.
I love that.
Yeah, and exactly. So it made it sort of potentially exist the same way that I did in space. So I could imagine it having an inner life, having an interior space. Yeah, and then I realized, okay, so why does the simple fact that it potentially functions as a human being, you know, so amazing. I still don't know exactly why, but I think like a person is the most amazing object in the world, you know, because and I think there's different reasons. Well, probably because its inner space is infinitely large, but its outer space is finite.
Yeah.
And I think that
So good.
connect like that sort of like connection between the infinity of the outer space, of the inner space, and the finiteness of the outer space makes the object kind of amazing.
As much as it's about you kind of having this understanding, you're also taking into consideration how the viewer is going to experience it as well, which I really, really enjoy that part of presentations of your work, and hearing what you're saying now. Like it's you're taking into consideration what you want the audience or the viewer to absorb from the work as well, and to feel the presence.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm not always thinking of the viewer as as an other.
Right,
I imagine
right.
the viewer as being just like me, you
Right,
know,
okay.
as someone who likes mystery, who likes to be fascinated with surprises, with kind of who likes I think that like if I walk in the forest or in nature with someone, with a friend, I mean, we're probably going to be drawn by the same little things, you know, like we're going to be drawn by those weird insects that we've never seen anywhere before,
Yeah.
or by whatever is hiding underneath a rock, or by the beauty of how that ray of sunlight is hitting the tree. You know, like we're kind of like, we're all very similar. So so whenever I think about the viewer, I don't think about the viewer as an other. I think about it as someone who's very functions like me. So so if I'm excited about something, you know, I figure that the viewer is going to be also excited about it.
There's something that just dawned on me when you said the word mystery, and I'm thinking about in biology and in life, or in making what you make, and the way you're thinking about works that you make. The sense of mystery is profound in biology. You're trying to find a sense of truth, or you're trying to find, you know, a connection. You're trying to you're trying to understand the way the world works, but you're also really open to mystery when that happens. And I think that I can totally see like how what you're making in your work really connects to that idea of mystery, hoping maybe there can be a truth, but maybe not. And it's just this idea that fascination with the potential of life is always there.
Yeah, exactly. It's the mystery, the sort of like, yeah, the liveliness, the energy. I think basically, as I'm talking to you about it, I think it's really the mystery that's at the core of what draws me into art and into life the most. Is
Yeah, and I was thinking about your work, obviously, it works really well on social media because you can move around the objects so nicely. And I always find people who see your work, or see it in person or see it on social media, how surprising your work is as you move around it. There's different, you know, it's not all the same. There's all these crazy imperfections and grotesque elements and raw parts, and you really have to walk around it or view it as a 360 object to really take it all in. When did you sort of understanding that potential of using 360 degrees was important?
Yeah, I mean, it came about when I made the sculpture for the first time.
Okay, so Napoleon gave you a 360 view. Okay,
yeah, exactly. But it's also the fact that I don't know. There's something about, although there's another aspect of art that I'm drawn to, that it really excites me. It's when I like my sculptures. I mean, that's not specific to sculpture,
right?
You know, it could be anything else, could be painting, whatever. But it's the fact that it always becomes something else. You can never actually grab the object intellectually.
Yeah.
You can never make sense of the thing because there's always another little detail that brings it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So if, like, whenever, when I'm making art, actually, when I'm making a sculpture. I like the idea, like whenever I sense that there's something clear, there's a clear meaning that's defining itself, I sort of like, I sort of sabotage it, you know, like I by adding a detail that's going to make the sculpture take a totally different direction, you know. If it's becoming too serious or too political or too clearly political, then I add something else that makes it become ridiculous or humorous or something. And then if it becomes too humorous, I make something that makes it become more dramatic and serious. So so I like the fact that the object is also, it's impossible to grab intellectually because it's always slipping away from your control, and which makes it become more like a person.
Yeah,
also, I mean,
right.
You can't figure out what a person is. A person doesn't have a meaning. A person is much more complex. It's a person is the expression of its infinite inner world. You know?
Right.
So I like that about objects.
And I feel like, in all honesty, if we were all sit down, everybody in the world, to discuss how life really is, life is a tragic comedy. Life is funny and absurd and sad and all these different things, and it can't just be one thing. It's going to be all these different parts. And the idea that there isn't absurdity is absurd. And I feel like your work captures the idea that absurdity is wherever you turn in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, totally. No, it's true. I mean, like, and as you said, yeah, there's, you know, just the fact that it's, you know, that life contains everything.
Yeah.
You know, and contains these, you know, infinite potentials. I like that to be in the objects I make as well.
And your work can be funny.
Yeah.
And I think that that's okay.
Yeah, no, I think that...
There's a couple cigarette smoking guys that are like some of the funniest shit I've seen in a gallery in my life. They're amazing.
Well, I'm glad you see it, you know? Yeah, I think that humor is definitely a big, big part of my process as well. I mean, it's connected to a kind of an energy, a trickster energy, maybe, that's really present every time I make sculpture. That's the energy that sort of like makes me bounce from one thing to the other, and that energy is allergic to clarity. Mm-hmm. You know, it wants to, every time something becomes too clear, it wants to flip things on its side and, you know, make something else grow, and that's like, humor is very much associated to that. So
no, sorry, go ahead.
No, and I was just gonna say that, like, I think there's something very humorous about that sort of like idea of always wanting to bounce from one thing to the other and sort of flip things on its head, and, you know, it's
I always just felt that your work was, not every artist can really find social media to be a great place to showcase what they do. But I felt like your work was really, really great for it, because it was so much fun when video elements came into social media, how fun it was to like walk around your sculpture and share it and like give people who can't see it in person like an idea of like what it is, as opposed to a painting that's just like digitally photographed and kind of like it feels very flat. Your work had life even in the most flattest of mediums, which is the phone.
Yeah. No, it's true. I never thought of it that way, but it's true that the three-dimensionality adds an experience that can actually be experienced through your iPhone or whatever.
Where to you is where's the most surprising place that you've seen your work in the collection of, you know, a collector, like where they have it in their house, or where is like also like where do you like to see your work? Like, I'm curious, like if you've seen a photo from a collector and say, oh my God, they have this sculpture next to their fireplace. That's so what, or like, you know, oh, it's in their bedroom. Like where do you like, where has surprised you, like to see your work existing outside of your studio?
Yeah, a long time ago, I remember going to a collector's place that had installed a pretty large sculpture of mine that was a big sort of like platform with cubby holes inside of it and objects that were displayed on the platform and hidden inside of it. There were channels that went through one side of the platform to another. So it was like kind of sort of like three-dimensional little labyrinth with some crystallizing werewolf heads here and there.
Yeah.
And some jewelry also here and there. And that collector had a lot of cats, and they all
so glad we're back to the
loved
cats.
it. They were like, they found places in the sculpture to
that's so good.
go hang out and sort of hide. And they were really, really careful, and they were able to avoid all the fragile places, you know, and then like go lie down in that little cubby hole or so that's, I think that was awesome.
Do you want your work to be touched and felt?
I mean,
is that because there is some delicate parts to it, is it difficult for that to?
I mean, the thing is that when it's touched and felt, I mean, I totally understand the drive for someone to want to figure out, you know, how something feels. I mean, sometimes you need to knock on an object in order to know what material it is.
Yeah, of
because
course.
like even bronze is not necessarily bronze, but it makes such a big difference when you knock on it and you hear the resonance of the metal, you know, and you know that it's hollow inside. It gives so much information.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. What's the piece of artwork? What's the last piece of artwork that you've wanted to touch that you, like in a museum or a gallery? Like you're like, oh my God, I want to touch this so bad. Like that's like amazing.
I think it's whenever there's hair or fur or something.
Wow.
I really want to see how if it's soft, it's, that's what I'm looking for, is like probably, and it makes such a big difference if the hair is synthetic or if it's real or whatever. And by touching it, you really figure out, no, I'm not, that does, like, you know, when I go in a museum, I'm really well behaved, you know. I'm kind of like, there's something in me that's I'm a little bit afraid of breaking the rules in public, you know, more than I am in my studio.
Right, exactly. Right? Yeah. What where do you source your synthetic hair?
It's not synthetic, actually. It's
holy shit.
It's
I'm glad I asked this. So where do you source your hair?
There's wig stores and
okay.
stuff. Yeah. And sometimes it's my own.
Really?
Yeah. Sometimes it's my own hair. Sometimes I've even used my pubic hair.
Is that in the materials list? Does it say pubic hair?
No, it says hair. It says artist's hair, you know? I don't have to be too specific.
I was going to say, you don't have to disclose that. I like that. Yeah. You have a good beard. So I could see, you know, that's...
I mean, the thing is that using beard hair is a little bit more difficult to glue.
Yeah.
But pubic hair is as well. But
for anyone out there who wants to use your pubic hair for a sculpture, I would be remiss if I didn't mention David Kordansky, White Cube, Xavier Hufkins, the three galleries that you work with, all in different places of the world. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes don't. How does the different audiences in these kind of major markets that you show in, like, does everyone have a different response? Is there in LA versus New York, or Brussels versus New York? Is there different responses to your work that you've noticed that's kind of fascinating?
Well, it's definitely different. I mean, but now that there's social media,
it
sort of makes everything kind of the same. I mean, like when things are posted online, you know, like most of the feedback that I get is through social media. So, I mean, you know, I can exhibit my work in Europe, but, you know, and have a lot of Americans.
I guess in terms of collectors.
The sort of collector world is, I'm a little bit disconnected from it. You know,
great. It's probably the best way to be.
Yeah, I think that I'm much closer to my Belgian collectors, for example. But I think it's just, maybe it's because of it, and I don't know if it's because of my specific gallery, my Belgian gallery, who's sort of like likes to introduce the collectors to the artist or whatever. But I feel like I'm much closer to my Belgian collectors. I mean, maybe it's because there's a tradition there, specifically in Belgium, where the collector does actually meet the artist. But everywhere else, it's a little bit more, it's more disconnected.
You were mentioning this thing before, and I wanted to touch on it, about disconnection, and about how when you're in the studio making a body of work, you not intentionally, but just because of the intensity and just because of the project itself, you disconnect a little bit from the world, and then you kind of come out of it and you're like, well, that's what,
Yeah.
Holy shit, what happened, or, oh, that's nice. How is that something that you've not perfected, but something that has become so very necessary to making a good body of work that feels very much like the story that you want to tell, is by disconnection?
Yeah, disconnection is absolutely necessary for me. It's like I have to almost isolate myself completely. It's just because I want to dig. I want to dig into darkness. I want to dig into where the mystery is, which is inside myself, I guess. So I have to sort of not forget about everything else. I have to forget about day-to-day life. And I'm trying not to do it too much because it's really hard to come out of that hole that I'm digging. So I always try to stay grounded in a certain way and speak to people every day, on the phone or whatever. But I see it as something that's necessary. I mean, I could be an artist and make work and still be super connected with the outside world. I'd find a different process or whatever, but I don't think that, me personally, I think that in order to really go deep, I have to forget about the outside world. Right.
And that's why you can do an interview now that the show's over. Yeah. Or the work is out of the studio and the show's up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't like having people over the studio when I'm still working on something. Just because it's it forces me to come out. I mean, I'm able to do it. I probably would talk in a very different way. I probably would talk from the perspective of someone who's still deep in that hole, and in darkness, and kind of so maybe it would be a little weird, but
What every single show you do, or every single body of work that you make, let's say for the Serpent, what have you learned in that show that you were excited to apply to the next thing that you're working on?
I think that the process and just the idea of letting myself be really excited about the unknown. I mean, just the sculpture of the serpent is something that for me I had no idea when I decided to tackle that sculpture. I had no idea what it was going to be, what it was going to look like.
Yeah.
And
so it's almost more like thinking about the way of approaching an idea is fresh for you. Not necessarily, almost not even construction, but the way of processing an idea.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool.
I think that's what I've learned from the Serpent, is to not be afraid of doing what wants to manifest, what wants to emerge, to just be okay with to be okay with what not completely seeing what's in front of me, to be okay with walking in a forest at night and not knowing what's right in front of me. It's okay, Oh,
I like that. Yeah, that's nice. That's a good visual. Do you miss Montreal?
I mean, I miss aspects of Montreal, but I think that I have a tendency to be so attached to my past and my experience as a child or something. I every time I go back to Montreal, I become a child again.
Yeah,
and that's kind of fun, but it's not great. I mean, I have a tendency to just exactly that my desire to always isolate myself and to dig a tunnel, like when I'm working on a body of work and I want to isolate myself and I dig myself a hole, a dark hole. It's kind of like going back into the womb or something in a certain way. And so I have that tendency, and I have to be careful about that. I have to I'm always drawn to going back into this. So, every time I go back to Montreal, I feel like that's what's happening as well. I become someone who doesn't necessarily do anything, who just wants to be safe, who just wants to just hang out with his family, and which is great. But I feel like that's an interesting energy. I mean,
but it's also an interesting energy to explore when you come back to the studio. It's like, why is it that what are these things? What are these things that make up the self? What are these places that make who I am who I am?
Yeah.
I find all that stuff so fascinating because I find myself very different when I'm in Northern California where I grew up than when I'm here. I just find it just different parts of myself. When I'm in New York, I'm a way more, I don't want to say open, but I'm like more like, I want to get out and see everything. And when I'm here, I'm a little bit like kind of quieter, a little bit more to myself. In Northern California, I'm a little bit, there's all these different parts of oneself that, for me, it's like I bring it back into my writing, but for you, you make it in, you're bringing all of these parts of yourself back into this exploration.
Totally. No, it's interesting. And I feel like where I am now, the part of myself that's kind of activated is very much the observer.
Yeah.
So here, I think that I'm distant enough from where I come from. When I go back to Montreal, it's the part of myself that's activated is that sort of like inner child that's afraid of life and that's afraid of everything and that just wants to be protected by his family.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm here in Los Angeles, I'm just much more kind of the part of me that's activated is that observer. In New York, it was something else. It was that sort of that hard-working, heroic guy who's sort of like riding the wave and stuff, it's interesting.
What's next, David? You're done with the Serpents out. It's out in the world. What is next for you, and what are you looking forward to? What are some things that you hope to get back into now that the body work is gone?
Yeah, I think that I'm gonna be. So I'm gonna make a few pieces for summer group shows that I'm working on.
It's like the festival. It's like I feel like it's like festival dates for a band. Like I'm gonna have a couple things that it's like I always like that kind of summer group show thing.
Oh, it's really good for me. Yeah. I mean, it's perfect to be able to come out of a large solo show and sort of like to be able to come out of it and start working on smaller scale pieces for some group shows. That's fantastic because it gives me a reason to go back in the studio and sort of like it guides me a little bit. Mm-hmm. I don't feel completely lost, and so it's nice to have. So I'm going to work on that. But I think that there's something that I have observed in The Snake and in some previous pieces. That's been like trying to emerge from the work. It's a feminine energy, and it's sort of really kind of, I would say, almost aggressive. And it's been, restrained for a really long time, and it really wants to emerge. And every time I'm aware of it, I'm working on a sculpture and I'm becoming aware of that energy and I'm touching the material, I can feel that it's almost
there.
It's there, and it's ecstatic, and it wants to be given a form. I'm a little bit afraid because I know I can feel that energy is very, very powerful, and it's really, but I think that it really believes in what I can give to it, mm-hmm. And it's really excited. I'm afraid of it because I know that it's more powerful than I am.
Is there a work in the Serpent that really feels like that really came out really strongly.
Well, I see the head of the serpent as being
That's
sort
really
of
cool.
more feminine.
Yeah.
And right now,
absolutely.
like, you know, when I worked on that serpent, I made sure that there was a sculpture right in front of it. Actually, the sculpture that's placed right in front of the serpent is a snake charmer. It's a snake charmer, and it's, in my mind, it's there to sort of like tone down the energy or calm down the snake. So and I think that it worked very well. While I was working on that serpent, the snake charmer, the sculpture of the snake charmer, was there in the studio right in front of it. So it was probably helping it kind of like be much more not restrained, but I would say calmer and sort of like. But I think that I have to be careful, because that if there's no sort of like spiritual order kind of like energy to counterbalance the energy of the serpent, it's going to really, really be out of control. And I have to be careful about that. But I'm really into, I feel like now for the future, for the short future, I have, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to help that energy come out and manifest.
I feel like the cat has something to do with this.
Yeah, the cat is definitely an expression.
We're coming full circle. Yeah.